1 in 4 women in their 30s, single by choice. Men walking away from love before it begins. Women paying strangers to hold their hand. This is Japan in 2026, and none of it was an accident. Tokyo runs on a contract its citizens never signed. Your train arrives to the second. Your street stays clean. On a packed subway during rush hour, the loudest sound is the doors sliding shut. In 2023, more than half of all households in Tokyo, 50.2%, held exactly one person. The most precisely organized city on Earth turned out to be one of the loneliest. In 2024, over 76,000 people in Japan died at home alone. Some went undiscovered for months. The Japanese have a word for it, kodokushi, lonely death. It now has government committees, annual budgets, and a body count. The city that never runs late has been quietly running out of people who come home to someone. To understand why, you have to start with what almost no outside account bothers to explain. What happens to a woman's career the moment she signs? In 2024, Japan recorded 485,000 marriages. The peak was over 1 million. In 1972, the fertility rate fell to 1.15, the lowest in recorded history. Tokyo's fell below 1. These numbers tell you what happened. They don't tell you why. The women walking away are not the ones who couldn't find a partner. They looked at the terms of the contract and decided the price was too high. Japan has one of the largest gender pay gaps in the developed world. Women earn about 22% less than men at the median. Female university graduates earn roughly what male high school graduates earn. That gap did not appear naturally. It was engineered into Japan's employment architecture in the 1950s, designed around a model where the company man worked indefinitely and someone else managed everything at home. That someone was always assumed to be a woman. Marriage and childbirth make it worse. 80% of employed women in Japan take childcare leave. 17% of men do. After giving birth, many women move from regular to non-regular employment. Lower pay, no path to advancement, no way back to where they were. Japan's own 2024 government report named this pattern a major issue. It offered no solution. Marriage in Japan is not a promise. It is a penalty clause. For a woman who already pays her own rent and builds her own career, the terms become transparent. Marriage does not add to her life. It reorganizes it around someone else's needs. At a measurable reduction in income, every year, hundreds of thousands of Japanese women choose to marry foreigners instead. The reason most often cited is not culture or appearance. It is one word: emotional openness. The willingness to say what they actually feel. Even marriages that do happen are increasingly childless. In 2024, births fell to 686,000 despite marriages slightly rising. A growing share of couples are choosing not to continue into parenthood. Japan is not just losing marriages, it is losing the belief that the contract, in its current form, is worth signing. But the story does not end with women walking away. Because on the other side of this, something stranger was happening to the men. In 2010, a survey by the Hakuhodo Institute asked Japanese men whether they identified as Soushoku-kei, herbivore men. 61% of men in their 20s said yes. 70% of men in their 30s agreed. Soushoku-kei is not laziness. It is a cost-benefit analysis made by an entire generation. The cultural script attached to masculinity in Japan runs on a prestige economy of overtime. The man who stays latest signals worth, earns the bonus, gets the title. That economy costs something every year it runs, and the returns on sacrifice grow less convincing the longer you look at them. These men did not reject love. They rejected what love was asking them to become. By 2015, 8% of Japanese men aged 18 to 39 had no lifetime sexual experience, up from 20% in 1992. Among both men and women aged 16 to 24, 45% of women and 25% of men described themselves as uninterested in sexual contact, not as an ideology, as a fact about their lives. Both sides were stepping back. The government looked at its marriage statistics. It panicked. In 2023, Japan launched the Children and Families Agency, deploying marriage support concierges across all 47 prefectures, with the central government covering 75% of the costs. In 2024, Tokyo released an official AI-powered dating app called Tokyo and Musubi. The government began offering women 600,000 yen, roughly $4,000, to leave Tokyo, attend matchmaking events, and marry in rural areas. Japan's most efficient bureaucracy was now trying to broker love. Both sides had stepped back from the original contract. But here is what the numbers cannot show. What it actually looks like to be a woman who already made her choice. The financially independent Japanese woman does not announce her choices. She examined her options and chose the one that worked. In 1990, 4.3% of Japanese women had never married by age 50. By 2020, that figure was 14.1%, more than triple. When asked why they remained single, 78.7% named freedom, not absence of options. Freedom. But freedom and loneliness are not opposites. A 2023 SMBC Consumer Finance survey found that 80.6% of single Japanese adults aged 25 to 39 who were actively searching for a partner felt emotionally exhausted by the process. Among women, that number was 86.8%. Most said they could not find anyone who matched what they were looking for. Many believed someone better was always just ahead and kept waiting, and then stopped. In Tokyo, there are roughly 1,000 host clubs. 320 of them sit in a single neighborhood in Shinjuku. Women pay to spend time with young men who pour their drinks, listen carefully, and make them feel noticed for a few hours. The best paid hosts earn over $100,000 a month. The customers understand the transaction. But in a city where genuine intimacy requires navigating enormous social cost, a time-limited, clearly priced arrangement can feel simpler than the alternative. Subscribe if this is still surprising you, because the next part is where Japan's own researchers took the longest to arrive. In Japan, there is a concept called Meiwaku, causing inconvenience to others. Children learn it before they can read. Do not be loud in shared spaces. Do not ask for help you could manage without. Do not bring your emotional needs into a room they were not invited into. This is not cruelty. It is the social contract that keeps 37 million people in one city from stepping on each other. The silence on the train, the orderly queues, the streets you could eat off. Meiwaku built all of it. But here's what happens when that contract runs deep enough. The needs don't disappear. They go underground, and someone builds a market for them. A study found that 45% of Japanese women and 25% of men aged 16 to 24 describe themselves as uninterested in sexual contact, not as philosophy, as a statement about their daily lives. That is what happens when a generation grows up with no comfortable language for wanting another person, and no social permission to be vulnerable without cost. Companies now provide trained actors to play a boyfriend, a husband, parents, convincing enough to attend a family gathering, patient enough to hold a full conversation. This is not deception for its own sake. This is what the gap between what a life looks like and what it is required to look like costs in yen per hour. At Soinia, Japan's first sleep cafe, in Akihabara, a 20-minute session costs 3,000 yen, about $19. That buys the physical presence of another person, someone to rest beside without explanation. A 10-hour overnight is 50,000 yen. For an extra 1,000 yen, $6, a customer can rest their head on a staff member's lap for 3 minutes. $6. 3 minutes. Human warmth, priced by the unit. In some ordinary cafes, staff quietly place a stuffed animal in the chair across from a customer eating alone, not as decoration, as a gesture toward the thing the room is not allowed to name. If a relationship ends and the conversation feels impossible, a company will break up with your partner for you. If an apology is owed but shame makes it undeliverable, a professional representative will carry it. And if the weight of the ordinary becomes too much to hold, Japan offers mock funeral services. Clients lie in a coffin and listen to prayers just to briefly step outside their own lives. Separately, each of these sounds like a curiosity. Together, they are a diagnosis. Have you ever felt this, surrounded by people, genuinely alone in a way you couldn't explain to anyone around you? Drop a comment below. In 2024, over 76,000 people in Japan died at home, alone. Around 130 of them were not found for more than a year. Japan did not eliminate loneliness, it made loneliness profitable. The word Hikikomori describes people who withdraw from society, not for days, but for months or years. Japan's Cabinet Office estimated in 2022 that 1.46 million people were living this way, isolated from work, school, and often family, 2% of the working age population. Among Hikikomori, Aged 40 to 64, women now account for 52.3%. Not a youth problem, a structural one. When Meiwaku means not burdening others, when showing weakness carries real social cost, disappearing from the world becomes, for some people, the considerate option. The wall feels safer than the door. Not defeat. Consideration, taken to its limit. For a smaller number, the retreat goes further. There is a forest at the base of Mount Fuji that the government now addresses with committees and signage. What they are managing is the far end of the same chain. The chain that starts with Meiwaku and ends somewhere a timetable cannot reach. And yet, this is Japan. And Japan is never only one thing. In 1872, Japan's Meiji government officially permitted Buddhist monks to eat meat, marry, and have children. Today, roughly 80% of Buddhist temples pass from father to son. The same government now subsidizes dating apps. The institutional logic has never changed. You cannot write human need out of a system by decree. In the city of Kawasaki, there is an annual festival called Kanamara Matsuri. Thousands of people carry large, deliberately absurd floats through the streets. 17th century origins, originally a prayer for fertility. Today, it is also one of Japan's most significant annual gatherings for LGBTQ+ communities, who find in its irreverence a space that everyday life does not permit. Part of the proceeds funds HIV research worldwide. A 2024 government survey found that 39.3% of people in Japan feel lonely. That figure peaks among adults in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, not the elderly. The people commuting in silence, following every unwritten rule, keeping every expression of unmet need carefully off their faces. The festival does not fix that, but it tells you something real. When a culture builds no official channel for imperfection, people build unofficial ones. And they fill them, every year, without being asked. Japan built a society that functions. The discipline is real. The care people extend to public space and to strangers, these things are genuine and they matter. What it did not build is room. Room for the woman who decided her ambitions were worth keeping. Room for the 1.46 million behind closed doors. Room for love that does not come with conditions attached. Japan's most successful women did not walk away from marriage because they failed. They walked away because the contract asked too much. The question this country is still working through, and that may already sound familiar to you, is whether a system with no room for human mess is really a system that works, or whether it is simply one that runs on time.